title, Hurdles Learners Experience When Writing a Master's Dissertation, Bridging the Gap Between Theory and Practice. It is specifically designed to tackle the challenges learners face when writing master's dissertation. Our focus is on navigating the complex intersection of theoretical foundations and practical applications, ensuring a seamless research experience. Join us to overcome hurdles, bridge the theory practice gap, and produce high quality research. Now I call upon Mrs. Casey Maitli ma'am to introduce the chief guest. Thank you.
Thank you, Vilasini ma'am. Once again. I feel privileged to introduce our resource person of today's workshop, Dr. Samia Hajjab, to the audience. Dr. Samia Hajjab is a distinguished Algerian university lecturer who serves full-time in the Department of English Language and Literature at Mohammed Lamine Debagine Setif II University. She holds a PhD in Linguistics and Didactics from Algiers II University, Algeria. The professor teaches a variety of courses, including linguistics, teaching English as a foreign language, methodology of teaching English, language acquisition, oral expression, and research methodology. Her academic interests encompass a wide range of topics related to classroom dynamics and pedagogical practices. These include conversation analysis, intercultural communication, pragmatics, communicative competence, fluency, and the development of English as a foreign language learners. Dr. Hajjab has contributed to her field through a number of publications and has participated in both national and international conferences, sharing her research insights and engaging with the global academic community on topics that include the relationship between conversational storytelling and EFL learners' pragmatic fluency, the globalization of tourism, a challenge to promote Arabic language and protect cultural identity, schooled discourse, language and gender in institutional settings, to name a few. Her work continues to influence the teaching of English and classroom practices in Algeria and beyond. We feel very privileged to have you amidst us today, ma'am, and welcome once again on behalf of the Department of English and Other Foreign Languages, Efl Rm Ramapuram. Over to Vilasini, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your introduction, ma'am.
Thank you.
Dr. Soumya, ma'am, the session is over to you.
Thank you very much. So first and foremost, I'd like to express my genuine gratitude to the Faculty of Science and Humanities, and particularly to the Department of English and Other Foreign Languages at SRM Ramapuram for hosting this one-week international virtual workshop on excellence in research methodology. I cannot forget to thank all the academic and administrative staff, particularly Dr. Kumar, Danish Kumar, who introduced me to this scientific realm, and particular thanks go to Dr. Nafia, who was very professional. I'd like that my lecture today is going to be fruitful and insightful to my dear learners. So, as you can see, that my lecture has been entitled Hurdles Learners Experience When Writing Master Dissertation. We are going to bridge the gap between theory and practice. Thus, my lecture is going to be divided into two parts. The theory, where I expose the academic culture and the main issues that our postgraduate learners are going to meet in their academic journey. In addition, in the practice, we are going to see together the stereotyped format of a master dissertation. So by way of introduction, we all know that preparing dissertations is a pressing concern for postgraduate learners. As a matter of fact, it is claimed that most postgraduate research and master dissertation is a part of them, does not endeavor to produce groundbreaking unearths or innovative conceptions. It is rather a training ground learning the art of methodical inquiry. Tomsic, for example, in 2006 argues that the goal of postgraduate research should be to reach or to teach our learners how to conduct systematic scrutinies, building on the antecedent work of their peers in the field and then prepending to what is already known. It is more overriding to do a rigorous examination than to dilate our understanding. However, writing a master dissertation can be a dismaying burden for both native and non-native speakers. And it calls for potent writing and competent hard skills as knowing about the academic culture, planning, conducting research, critical thinking, linguistic competence. This is just to mention a few. Indeed, a good number of scholars have conducted research studies in various higher educational contexts around the world, expressing or dealing with these challenges. For example, Shaw, Bichna, and Basterkman, Ho, Komba, and Tsai have found that students faced difficulty in structuring the constituent parts of the dissertation. And the outcomes of these studies showed that the most difficult dissertation elements to write were introduction and discussion, literature review, and discussion of the results. And these difficulties or hurdles were attributed to EFL learners' insufficient genre-specific writing skills and unawareness of the rhetorical structure of the dissertation. And apart from the generic and the rhetorical challenges, the literature shows that some students who have to write a dissertation in English as a foreign or a second language still struggle with more palpable linguistic difficulties as problems with grammar, punctuation, and limitation in vocabulary to express ideas and views. And upon investigating postgraduate student challenges when completing master research, Seiden, Vilo, and Shari in 2016 found that postgraduate learners encountered 4 main challenges in conducting their master research, which were counted as different fields of interest, time management, supervision, in addition to the lack of research knowledge. And a number of researchers concentrated on the latter, which is research knowledge challenges, and defined them as the main challenge. This is why today we are going to tackle the research knowledge challenges. Let's start by the academic culture. First of all, let's introduce applied linguistics research. It is research that contributes to more effective teaching and learning, not by offering definitive answers to pedagogical questions, but rather by providing new insights into the teaching and learning process. And to provide a more comprehensive view of research, we examine it from the perspective of what Richard terms a paradigm, a tradition, and a method. A paradigm is a set of basic beliefs regarding research. A tradition is an approach to research covering generally recognized territory and employing a generally accepted set of research methods. And the method is a means of gathering, analyzing, and interpreting data using generally recognized procedures. And in my lecture, we are going to see together all these notions divided and explained. Let's start by the research paradigms. Basically, when we say a research paradigm, we are going to speak about 2 types of research, basic and applied. One of the most central distinctions made in discussing research is the difference between basic and applied research. The purpose of basic research is to design studies that can test, refine, modify, or develop theories. And this type of research may be explanatory, exploratory, or descriptive. Whereas applied research examines the effectiveness and usefulness of particular educational practices. And here the goal is to determine the applicability of educational theory and the principles by testing hypotheses within specific settings. Also in research, we find 2 main types of data. Of research, of course. We have secondary research and we have primary research. There are 2 major sources of data. That's both basic and applied researchers can gather while conducting research. As I said, secondary data and the primary one. Let's speak about secondary research. Particularly, here we are speaking about literature reviews. And in using secondary data, researchers examine what others have discovered about a particular field or domain. And in using primary data, researchers gather original data to answer a particular research question. As McDaniel and McDaniel in 1997 note, when researchers gather first-hand data, the outcome is knowledge nobody had before. For example, we gather data directly from students who are learning a language rather than from secondary sources, means from other books or journals or other works done previously. Also, in educational research, we have to distinguish between two types of reasoning, inductive and deductive. It is often referred to, here we speak, it is often referred to as a bottom-up approach to knowing, in which the researcher uses particular observations to build an abstraction or to describe a picture of the phenomenon that is being studied. Inductive reasoning usually leads to inductive methods of data collection, where the researcher, first of all, systematically observes the phenomena and the investigation, then searches for patterns or themes in the observation, and by the end, he is going to develop a generalization from the analysis of those themes. So the researcher proceeds from specific observations to general statements, which is a type of discovery approach to knowing. Whereas the other type of reasoning uses a top, which is deductive, of course, uses a top-down approach, and in educational researchers, use one aspect of deductive reasoning by first making a general statement and then seeking specific evidence that would support or disconfirm that statement. And this type of research employs what is known as the hypothetic didactic method, which begins by forming a hypothesis, which is a tentative explanation that can be tested by collecting data. And this hypothesis would be tested on a theory or a knowledge base composed of the results of previous work or previous studies. Moreover, inductive reasoning is most closely associated with qualitative approaches to research, and deductive reasoning is related to quantitative approaches to research. And yesterday, Dr. Kumar explained fairly the qualitative and the quantitative approaches. But now let's just make a brief view. So, my dear students, when we say traditions, we are speaking about qualitative approaches and quantitative ones. It is a research. A qualitative approach is a research in which the focus is on naturally occurring phenomena, i.e., it collects and summarizes data using primarily narrative or verbal methods, like observations, interviews, and diaries, and data are recorded in non-numerical form. Let's take an example of a diary where learners keep track of their attitudes during a year-long Japanese language course, for example. And by the end, I am going to return back to this very approach. Quantitative approach, on the other hand, summarizes data using numbers, and hypotheses and methods of data collection in quantitative research are created before the research begins. Hypotheses or theories are then tested, and when supported, these theories or hypotheses are typically considered to be generalizable, i.e., applicable to a wide range of similar situations and populations. In different words, quantitative research generally starts with an experimental design in which a hypothesis is followed by the quantification of data and some sort of a numerical analysis is carried out. Sometimes we need a mixed method approach in research, which is a combination between the qualitative approach and the quantitative one. So I say here, in some studies, researchers use both qualitative and the quantitative methods to answer their research questions. And since here we have a mixed method approach, so surely that there is the triangulation of the research tools. and we are going also to tackle this later. Longitudinal and cross-sectional researches. The main difference between longitudinal and cross-sectional studies concerns the role of time in what is being investigated. Longitudinal studies involve collecting data from the same individuals or groups at different points in time, with the researcher collecting data regularly over many weeks, months, and sometimes even years, to examine how a particular individual or group changes over time. And a typical longitudinal study might seek to compare one group of learners, for example, performance of knowledge, to a particular linguistic structure at different points in time. Cross-sectional studies, on the other hand, we find data are typically collected at a single point in time, with the researcher looking for relationships or patterns in the data. For example, a cross-sectional study might examine learners' knowledge of a linguistic structure by looking at data collected at just one point in time. So the matter here is time. Sources of research questions. Surely we are going to do a research, so we are going to ask questions. Research is the process whereby questions are raised and answers are sought by carefully gathering, analyzing, and interpreting data. In some cases, answers are hypothesized, predictions made, and data collected to support or discredit hypothesized answers. Yes, how are we going to identify important research questions? The motivating force behind research is the inherent curiosity of human beings to solve problems. We see phenomena around us and we begin to ask questions. What is something made of? How did it get here? How does this phenomenon relate to the other? Does one phenomenon cause another one to exist, to decrease or increase? One source of research questions is is by observing practical problems in the language classroom, because everyday teachers, students, and administrators are confronted with issues that require informed answers. Another source of research questions is especially secondary sources, and here we speak about literature review. The third source is in identifying questions is by doing a primary research. In fact, this is one of the most rewarding locations for discovering current questions being asked by the applied linguistics community. And the better versed where we find the research literature, the more aware we become of the missing pieces in our framework of knowledge. Many issues in primary research might lead us to raise important questions from previous research. For example, sampling the type of material used in a treatment, the method for administering a treatment, and the way in which the data were analyzed are often places where gaps might be found. Further research is needed to help complete the bigger picture before our own questions can be answered. This is why we always ask our learners, once they read in the literature about a particular topic, they don't only stick to what is said in literature, but they continue reading the methodology. As a researcher, for example, I put in my mind that I am going, for example, to choose a questionnaire as a research tool. But after reading some books, some researches, no, I change my mind and maybe I do other, or I choose other research tools. The next place to look for research queries or questions is in the discussion conclusion section of a study, usually identified by the terms limitations and recommendations for further research. So this is a very nice place where we start. So this is the gap in a particular study. Sorry. Aside from personal interest, research questions need to be able to generate new information or confirm old data in new ways. To do this, a review of the literature on the research topic must be done. This is why the first thing I advise my learners to do when they are asking about a particular topic, I said that the key word is reading. Read as much as you can. Of course, there are many other ways in which the question might be narrowed. A review of previous research will help us to refine the scope of research in another way, but even a fairly narrow question may need to be more carefully defined. How? Imagine that I am interested in conversation analysis, but conversation analysis is very broad. As much as I read, I will find other particular ways, for example, turn-taking mechanisms, which is an aspect under the umbrella of conversation analysis or discourse analysis in general. In narrowing or subcategorizing the concept, operational definitions must be given to show the scope of the subcategory. For example, I am doing a research about fluency. So fluency that I tackle in my research may be different from fluency that another person tackles. So here the views are different. What is an appropriate or an operational definition? An operational definition is a clear statement of how you judge it or identified a term in your research, as I said before. This is important for three reasons. You will need to be absolutely consistent throughout the research process in your definition. It is important for consumers of your research so that they do not misinterpret your findings. And also it is important to the research community that your study be replicable. Where can we find, by the way, these operational definitions? The first place is in the abstract. Afterwards, we are going to speak about them. Yes, the keywords are the operational definitions. Where to be explained? It is by the end of the general introduction of the dissertation. Good operational definitions can often be drawn from the existing literature. Sometimes, however, research is difficult to carry out because operational definitions cannot be found that will satisfy the researcher. Sometimes no operational definitions exist in the literature and the researcher must define terms. In some cases, we develop an operational definition for such concepts, but then find ourselves questioning the reality of the concepts themselves. So the attempt to establish concepts is an important area of research. So far, we have suggested that research questions should be or should interest us, promise new information or confirm old information in new ways, have reasonable scope, and also have key terms that are clearly defined, stated, and operationalized. Before we turn to stating the questions in a more formal way, we need to consider whether or not the research is feasible. So here, in this section, we are going to speak about factors affecting the feasibility of research. The feasibility of any study may depend on a number of factors. The first is the breadth of the study in relation to its research questions scope and answerability. The other point or the other factor, you must know how much time the project will take and whether or not you have that amount of time to spend. Please, are you with me? Hello? Please, are you with me? Please, are you with me? Hello? Okay. To be in time, I must, okay. Okay, stating research questions and hypotheses. Now that we have tackled about the scope and feasibility of research questions, it is time to consider how these questions can be clearly stated. Research questions can take a range of forms, and very often the researcher's prior study of the field and review of the literature will have exposed a need to explore, describe, or explain further a particular phenomenon through research questions before arriving at possible hypotheses. In exploratory research questions, the researcher aims to find out what is happening, to seek new insight, to pose new questions, and to attempt to assess the phenomenon in a new light. In other words, the study structures the research rather than the other way around, and the research may thereby become one of hypothesis building rather than hypothesis testing. Descriptive research questions will attempt to portray an accurate profile of people, events, or situations. On the other hand, exploratory questions will seek an explanation of a situation or problem, often in the form of causal relationships, and a particular study may be concerned with a combination of all three tendencies, but we should be able to highlight one principal trend through our initial reading of the research questions, and we are going to come back to the exploratory questions after a while. Furthermore, a particular study may be connected with a combination of the three tendencies, but here I have to highlight the importance of the preliminary study in all types of study, not just the experimental. Hypothesis. A hypothesis is a type of prediction found in many experimental studies, and it is a statement about what we expect to happen in a study. The hypothesis should ideally present the following information to the reader. First of all, there should be some statement concerning assumed relationships of lack of them between the variables, or the presumed influence of one or more of the variables on the other. Secondly, we can expect to read a hypothesis which really can be tested. That is, it looks to us as though it will become possible to assign operational definitions to the constructs or variables described, and thereby produce useful data which can be then analyzed. And we may have enough information to predict a difference in one direction or another, and this is called a directional hypothesis. The directional hypothesis may be positive or negative by informing the reader about the specific trend of the difference or relationship. And we can predict that there will be a difference between two groups, although we don't have sufficient information to predict the direction of the difference, and this is known non-directional hypothesis. Replication, which is one of the major issues in applied linguistics research. Replication is a central part of the development of any field of inquiry, and if one cannot repeat the results of a particular study, the validity of the results of the original study might be called into question. Okay. Generally speaking, there are two primary reasons for replication: verification and generalizability. There are also academic reasons having to do with the difficulty involved in replication. A researcher can easily replicate the instrument, the task, and the setting of the study, but when dealing with linguistic behavior, individual characteristics such as prior linguistic knowledge and knowledge come into play that would clearly be impossible to replicate for a variety of reasons. For example, no group of participants is going to be identical to another group. Statement of the problem, or others like to call it problem statement. It is a description of a difficulty or lack that needs to be solved, or at least researched to see whether a solution can be found. And it can also be described as either a gap between the real and the desired, or a contradiction between principle and practice. I have to come back again to the problem of statement when we come to speak about the ingredient of general introduction in writing a master dissertation. What is the goal of a statement of the problem? The ultimate goal is to transform a generalized problem, something that bothers you, a perceived lack, into a targeted, well-defined problem that can be resolved through focused research and careful discussion making. And writing a problem statement should help you clearly identify the purpose of the project you will propose. I will skip many issues just to respect time, because I want to go to the practice, which is more important. What are the chief features of a statement of the problem? A good research problem should, at minimum, address a gap be significant enough to contribute to the existing body of research, be one that will lead to more research, render itself to be investigated via collection of data, and be interesting to the researcher and suit his or her skills, time, and resources, in addition of being ethical. What is the format of statement of the problem? It means what are the ingredients, what we find. In fact, a persuasive problem statement consists of 3 main parts. Part 1 is the ideal. This is to describe a desired goal or ideal situation and explains how things should be. Part 2, it has to deal with the reality, which describes the condition that prevents the goal, state or value in part 1 from being achieved or realized at this time, and explains how the current situation falls short of the goal or ideal. And part 3, it is the consequences, where it means to identify the way you propose to improve the current situation and move it closer to the goal or ideal. Let's now go to another issue that we all meet when we come to research, which are research variables and scales of measurements. In order to carry out any sort of measurement, we need to think about variables. Afterwards, I am going to distinguish between variables and constructs. That is, characteristics that vary from one person to another, from text to another, from object to another. Simply put, variables are features or qualities that change. For example, a person's proficiency in English as a foreign language may differ over time as the person learns more and more English. Likewise, we can expect individuals to vary in their respective levels of proficiency in English at any given time. Thus, proficiency in English can be considered a variable because it may change over time or differ among individuals. Most variables that differ over time also vary among individuals, but the reverse is not necessarily true. Consider, for example, gender, sex, the state of being male or female, a variable that is often considered in studies. Certainly, there are observable and interesting differences among individuals on this variable, yet few people would expect to see numerous changes in this variable over time, and most individuals remain male or female throughout their lifetimes. There are many other variables of interest in language studies that differ both among learners and over time, including language proficiency, motivation, self-esteem, second language proficiency, and this is just to name a few. Variable types, these are the functions that we have spoken about, dependent and independent. The independent variable is the one that we believe may cause the results. The dependent variable is the one we measure to see the effects the independent variable has on it. And the independent variable is manipulated to determine its effect on the dependent one. Scales of measurement. How are we going to measure these variables? All quantifiable data are observable in some way. And the problem is that data may be observed or measured in different ways. This distinction is accounted for by the different kinds of scales used in statistical analysis. What are scales? First of all, they are means for the different ways of observing, organizing, and assigning numbers to data, which makes them important for understanding the entire data collection process. And the different types of scales can be said to measure with varying degrees of precision. As you will see, the 4 types of scales differ markedly and can be arranged hierarchically from least precise to most precise. This is why they are termed levels of measurement ordered as follows. We have nominal scales, we have ordinal scales, interval scales, and ratio scales. Nominal scales are used for naming and categorizing data in a variable. Examples of variables that group of people naturally include like gender, nationality, native language, social and economic status, and the like. Ordinal scales are used to order a rank data. For example, if you were interested in ranking your students from best to worst on the basis of their final examination scores. Yes, and interval scales like ordinal scale measurements, interval scale data tell us how much of the variable to attribute to a person, text, or object. The difference is that the measurement, is much more precise. I will explain. The intervals of measurement can be described. They reflect the interval or distance between points in the ranking. When you look at the final examination scores in one of the courses, you are dealing with an interval. For example, if Jim scored 90 out of 100, Jack scored 80, Jill scored 78, you could rank these students first, second, and third. And that would be an ordinal, but not interval. But the scores themselves give you more information than that. They also tell you the interval or distance between the performances of the examination. It means Jim scored 10 points higher than Jack, but Jack only scored 2 points higher than Jill. Thus, an interval scale provides more precision and information than does an ordinal scale. Ratio scales will be, the discussion about them will be short because such scales are not generally applied in social and behavioral sciences, because a ratio scale has a 0 value, and it can be said that points on the scale are the most precise. Ratio scales, in fact, have a true 0 point, where 0 represents the absence of the category. Let's take an example. You can have 0 electricity in your house, but can you say that a particular person knows 0 of Spanish or of Arabic, whatever? I think that we cannot do this. Even a person who has never studied Spanish or Chinese or whatever language will bring certain lexical, phonological, and syntactic information from the native language to bear on the task. Internal and external validity. Here we speak about controlling extraneous variables, and this is, by the way, this is a crucial aspect in any research. Why? Because validity and reliability are to be considered the core elements in any scientific study. The central issues in thinking about any type of research depend on whether the research is logical and meaningful. And after spending a great deal of time and effort designing a study, we want to make sure that the results of our study are valid. That is, we want them to reflect what we believe they reflect, and that they are meaningful in the sense that they have significance not only to the population that was tested, but at least for most experimental research to a broader relevant population. Interval validity. It refers to the extent to which the changes observed in the DV, it means dependent variable, IV, it means independent variable. So the changes observed in the DV are caused by the IV, or as noted by Campbell and Stanley, it has to do with interpreting results of the research within study itself. In other way, it refers to what extent are the differences that have been found for the dependent variable directly related to the independent variable. A researcher must control for all other possible factors that could potentially account for the results. External validity. It refers to the generalizability and representativeness of the findings, or as noted by the previously named researchers, it has to do with interpreting findings and generalizing them beyond the study. And with external validity, we are concerned with the generalizability of our findings, or in other way, the extent to which the findings of the study are relevant not only to the research population, but also to the wider population of language learners. It is important to think through a design carefully to eliminate or at least minimize threats to internal validity. Some of the most common and important ways include participant characteristics, language background, language learning experience, proficiency level, participant inattention and attitude, participant maturation, and data collection, in addition to the instrumentation and test effects. So far, we have spoken and we have repeated two main concepts, generalizability and population. I'd like to explain them. The first is usually defined as the degree to which the results of a study based on a sample can be said to represent the results that would be obtained from the entire population from which the sample was drawn. In other terms, generalizability depends on the degree to which the particular sample in question can be said to be representative of the population. And what is a population? Is the entire group of people that a particular study is interested in. For example, very sample data should represent what would result if data for the entire population were used. In other words, the results of the study should be representative of results that would occur if the researcher researchers in general were able to investigate the entire population. Therefore, a number of strategies are used to accomplish this representativeness. But the most common ones are called, we have two main types of sampling. We have random sampling and stratified random samples. What is the random sampling? It refers to the selection of participants from the general population that the sample will represent. In most second language studies, the population is the group of all learners, perhaps in a particular context. Quite clearly, second language researchers do not have access to the entire population, so they have to select an accessible sample that is representative of the entire population. There are two common types of random sampling, simple random, and simple random sampling is generally believed to be the best way to obtain a sample that is representative of the population, especially as the sample size gets larger. However, simple random sampling is not used when researchers wish to ensure the representative presence of particular subgroups of the population under investigation. In that case, stratified random sampling is used. In stratified random sampling, the proportions of the subgroups in the population are first determined, and then participants are randomly selected from within each stratum according to the established proportions. And the stratified random sampling provides precision in terms of the representativeness of the sample and allows pre-selected characteristics to be used as variables. Validity and reliability of measurement. Now we are going to learn about reliability and validity of a measure. Validity asks if an instrument measures what it is supposed to and how true or accurate the measurement is. Types of validity. I am not going to spend much time, and if you want after to share with you my lecture, I will be pleased to. There are many types of validity. We have content validity, we have phase validity, we have construct validity, we have criterion-related validity, we have also predictive validity. Reliability. In its simplest definition, refers to consistency and often meaning instrument consistency. For example, one could ask whether an individual who takes a particular test would get a similar score on two administrations of the same test. And if a person takes a written driving test and receives a high score, it would be expected that the individual would also receive a high score if he or she took the same written test again. We could then say that the test is reliable. And this differs from validity, which measures the extent to which the test is an indication of what it purports to measure. There are two ways that one can determine rater reliability and instrument reliability. Rater reliability. The main defining characteristic of rater reliability is that scores by two or more raters, the rater is the person who is doing the research, okay, or between one rater and time X, and that same rater at time Y are consistent, means the same. Inter-rater and intra-rater reliability. In many instances, test scores are objective, and there is little judgment involved. However, it is also common in second language research for researchers to make judgments about data. Inter-rater reliability. It begins with a well-defined construct. It is a measure of whether two or more raters judge the same set of data in the same way. If there is strong reliability, one can then assume with reasonable confidence that raters are judging the same set of data as representing the same phenomenon. Intra-rater reliability. It considers one researcher's evaluations of data, attempting to ensure that the researcher would judge the data the same way at different times. Instrument reliability. Now, not only do we have to make sure that our raters are judging what they believe they are judging in a consistent manner, we also need to ensure that our instrument is reliable. And the three types of reliability testing here is to be tackled: test, retest, equivalence of forms of a test in addition to the internal consistency. What is a research design? If anyone asks you, you are going to prepare a master dissertation, what is your research design? A research design is the researcher's choice of the constituents, the elements of his project. It is the outlining phase of the research which dwells upon a number of elements organized logically and systematically with the purpose of visualizing its practicability. And the choice of research components is done in the light of the main objectives of the research, addressing the problem under investigation. A research design consists of the following elements: research methods and strategy, sampling techniques, choice of data gathering instruments, validity, reliability concerns, and choice of statistical techniques. Dissertation outline. This is the point that I wanted a lot to reach. So look, my dear learners, this is a stereotyped format. It can change according to the research design. It can change according to each university. There are some universities who ask that the abstract is long. Others ask to be limited to a certain point of words. It depends. Okay, so particularly these are the main components. We have the title, the abstract, acknowledgement, introduction. This is general introduction, conceptual framework, theoretical framework, research method, empirical analysis, discussion, conclusion, reference. My dear learners, like I always advise my learners here in CTF2 University, once I supervise them, look, any research, whatever the research design, whether it is experimental, whether it is exploratory, whether it is explanatory, descriptive, each research must go through three main stages. The first is the preliminary stage, where the research gap is to be proved. Imagine that you say that my learners or learners of first year suffer from language proficiency. Who said this? What proves? So here there should be a preliminary stage. And where to put the findings of the preliminary stage? It is in the statement of the problem. You said that we have a problem at our university with year X and so on. So here you have to prove. The second stage of any research with any research design is a small scale study. What does it mean, a small scale study? It is called the piloting phase. It means you have to pilot your research instruments. And if your research design is experimental, you have also to pilot the research treatment. The intervention itself should be, tested. And then the third stage is the main study. So I repeat, in any research, in any scientific research, whatever the research design, there must be three stages: preliminary stage, small scale study, and the main one. Let's analyze these components. The title of the dissertation, it is the first thing to be read, and it should capture the reader's attention. Please avoid using acronyms in your titles, because a good research title should contain the fewest possible words needed to adequately describe the contribution of or contributions of the thesis. Let me explain something else Imagine that your research is experimental. If your research is experimental, the variables, it means the IV and the DV, the dependent variable and the independent variable must be clear. And now, imagine that your research design is explanatory, is exploratory. We don't have variables, we have constructs, or we call them keywords. Like, let's give you an example. Exploring learners and teachers' attitudes towards learners' language proficiency after applying like videos. So here we don't have a cause-effect relationship. We have just constructs. So please, when your research design is not experimental, don't call the construct variables. Okay. The abstract is called how to say, like a very summary or a brief review about your work. And it must contain the following: the background, methods, results, and conclusion. Let me explain thoroughly this very point, because the abstract is what is read most of the time by researchers. The abstract is all of the time written as a block. In this block, it is theoretically divided into two parts. In the first part, you have to introduce the topic in one sentence or more, or two, no more. You have to introduce the methodology. When we say you introduce the methodology, sometimes you introduce even the aim or aims of your study, and then you introduce the methodology. In the methodology, you have to introduce the research design. What does mean research design? If your work is exploratory, is explanatory, is experimental, quasi-experimental. Also in the methodology, you have to introduce your participants, the setting, you have to introduce the research tools, and also the data analysis method. It means, what does it mean, the data analysis method? Imagine that you have used two research tools, questionnaire and an interview. Qualitative data, how was it analyzed? And quantitative data, how was it analyzed too? Also, so this is the first part of any abstract. And most of the time, the tense to be used is past. And the second part of the abstract is to be devoted mainly to the results, what you have brought in your study. And the tense to be used is either present simple or present perfect. And you can end by one sentence or two about the implications. This is the best way to write an abstract. How to write a general introduction. Okay, so we have to speak first of all about the background of the research or of the study. We have to state the research aims or objectives. We have to speak about the research problem. We have to speak about the research importance or significance. We have to speak about the research motivations or the rationale. Why have you done this study? The research contributions or newness. What was new in your research? And also don't forget to explain the operational definitions. I repeat what I said at the beginning. After when we write the abstract, by the end we write keywords. These keywords are the operational definitions. They are the definitions to be explained by the end. Myself, I advise my learners that they have two ways in writing operational definitions. Whether you take from the literature exactly, whether you take from the literature what exactly a definition is. For example, according to Ellis in 1996, he said this and that. Or other researchers prefer to do the following. They prefer to, for example, to analyze. You give your personal analysis of what you have read. This is the idea. Let's move on. Research background. What to write in the research background? Research background information identifies and describes the history and the nature of a well-defined research problem with reference to the existing literature. But here, pay attention, my dear learners. When we say the existing literature, it means don't open a very broad space to the literature. Why? Because the literature review has its own space. Also, the background information should indicate the root of the problem being studied, its scope, and the existence to which previous studies have successfully investigated the problem, noting in particular where gaps exist that your dissertation attempts to address. And introductory background information also differs from a literature review, as I have already explained. Aims and objectives, simply the specific steps you will take to achieve your aim. Research importance, it means why do you choose this very topic? Research motivations or rationale, it means why it is interesting to look at the relationship between Y and X. Why is it of interest to look at this research topic again? Does it potentially tell us something different from what we learned before? And what are the uniqueness of your context? Don't forget to speak, as I said, about operational definitions. What is the structure? The structure of dissertation, it means you should just explain briefly what each chapter consists of. Please, since you are going, for example, to write a master dissertation, make it very comprehensive. How? Try to divide it mainly into two chapters. Chapter 1 is about the literature review, and please, in the literature review, don't only speak about the variables or constructs. What do you do? At least always I ask my learners that in the literature review, you should have at least 4 sections. Section 1 for keyword 1, section 2 for keyword 2. When it is experimental, we say IV and DV. Section 3 is about the influence of one construct on the other, or one variable or on the other. And section 4, it is about the related literature. What does it mean, related literature? It is a section that is very important and most of the time neglected by our learners. What does this mean, related literature? It means those works that share with you the same objectives. This is the idea, so please don't forget. Chapter 2, it is to be devoted mainly to the methodology. Critical literature review. This is a very good point to explain. Literature review, always I ask my learners, or I tell my learners to think about this, that literature review is not a shopping list. It means this said, this said, this said. No, but it is very, very critical. You are going to add, you are going to analyze, you are going to synthesize. This is the idea. Methodology or empirical study. So here we are going to speak about the research design. Research design, it means whether experimental, exploratory, explanatory, whatever. The case study, you are going to speak about the method. It is qualitative, quantitative, or it is mixed. The type of the triangulation, it means what are the instruments that you have used. Research setting, participants, population of the research. Procedure. What does this mean, procedure? It means how did you start your research? What was the first step? Also in methodology, you have to speak about reliability and validity as core issues in any work, as I said before. How did you administer the instrument and how did you pilot the instrument also should be mentioned in the methodology. Data analysis procedures also must be tackled in the methodological section. Ethical considerations as well as limitations are to be tackled. Section 2. Look, my dear learners, as we said that the literature, at least in a master dissertation, must be divided into 4 sections. The methodology chapter is to be divided into three at least sections. And also bear in mind that there should be a particular balance between the two, between the theoretical part and the practical part. How? What are we going to speak about in methodology? In section 1, you present the data presented before. Let me show you. All these issues must be presented in section 1. Section 2, you are going to deal only with the statistical data and the statistical readings. What does it mean, statistical readings? It means you display the graphs, the tables that you have, and you make a statistical reading. It means the highest percentage, the lowest percentage, and so on. Some researchers or some, teachers ask their learners to make the interpretation here. It means after each graph, they are going to interpret. Personally, I advise my learners to not mix issues. because this is applied much more in articles, not in dissertations, I prefer to keep a particular section, which is section 3, for data analysis, discussion, and interpretations. Here you discuss the findings, you display the recommendations and the pedagogical implications, and even you can speak about the limitations of study. I said sometimes the limitations in general, according to each university, they ask to put them in the general introduction. Sometimes they ask you to put in the methodological. Sometimes they ask you to keep them in the last section of the methodology. It depends. General conclusion. How to write a general conclusion? My dear learners, the general conclusion is not like writing an abstract. It can never be written in one page. And always I call it a panoramic view of the whole work. You can speak about everything in these pages of the general conclusion. And as I have written here, the conclusion is not a summary. This is the place to share with readers the conclusions you have reached because of the research done. The purpose of a conclusion is to tie together, integrate, and synthesize the various issues raised in the discussion section, whilst reflecting the introductory thesis statements or objectives. Provide answers. Please, my dear learners, at the very beginning, we have raised questions. So now don't forget to answer your questions or to go back to your hypothesis, especially when your work is, experimental. List of references, they have to respect the citation guidelines of the appropriate style. Some universities oblige learners to respect the APA, sometimes the MLA. If it is APA, the 6th edition, the 7th edition. What I ask my learners, please be consistent. It means when they ask you to use, or when you use the 6th edition of the APA, be consistent from A to Z. Okay, because this is research, it is logic and consistency. Appendices. If you have inside appendices, for example, you said that I have conducted an FGD, a focus group discussion with my learners. Okay, without giving us an appendix by the end to refer to, no. So appendices are a must in any work. Translating the abstract. This happens, for example, in my country. What they ask by the end, I don't know what is happening in India. What is translating the abstract? It means the abstract that you have written already in English, because English in Algeria is a foreign language. So they ask us to translate the abstract in Arabic because it is the mother tongue. And even universities here in Algeria are different at the length of the translation. Some universities ask you to translate the abstract as it is in English, and others say no, because it is your mother tongue, it should take more space, like 10 pages, and this happened in my magister personally. To conclude, I say that the process of writing a master dissertation involves not only writing per se, but it also encompasses a number of phases and steps, beginning with the selection of a researchable topic up to the final stage, which is the writing up of the dissertation manuscript. In brief, research works are the repositories of scientific observations, in addition to the recipes used to make those observations. And by the end, thank you very much. And I'm so sorry if I took much time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful session. It was really helpful, especially for the scholars, teachers, and everyone. And now I call upon Mr. Rexmart for word of thanks.
Good evening and welcome to the conclusion of the second day of our workshop on excellence in research methodology. As we wrap up another insightful session, it is my honor to deliver the vote of thanks. Firstly, I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed speaker and research person, Dr. Soumya Hajab, who shared the expertise with us today. Your presentation and discussion provided us with deeper insights into the topic. We are truly grateful for your time and dedication, ma'am. I thank our management for giving the opportunity to organize this event. I thank our Associate Director, Sir, Dean, Sir, and VP, Sir, for their support and motivation to organize the event. A special thanks goes to HOD Ma'am for encouraging us to conduct this event in a vivid manner. I thank the organizing committee members and department faculty members who have tirelessly worked behind the scenes to ensure that every aspect of this workshop runs smoothly. I would also like to thank our participants for their enthusiastic engagement and participation. Thank you all once again for your valuable contribution today. Have a wonderful evening, and I look forward to seeing you all back here tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you all, audience, for your patience listening, and thank you very much, Soumya ma'am, especially. Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you very much. I was very happy and very delighted to be with my dear colleagues in India to share my ideas.
Same from our side, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.